Hello and welcome to the 2023 Support for Organizations Grant Workshop. My name is Taylor Jackson and I am the Director of Grants here at HAA. Today we will be providing you with an overview of our work at HAA, share details about city-funded opportunities, and then we'll review the application process for Support for Organization grants. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available in post. So let's get started. So who is Houston Arts Alliance? We are a local arts and culture organization whose principal work is to implement the City of Houston's vision, values, and goals for its arts, grant making, and civic art investments. HAA, our work is conducted through a contract with the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs. We also execute privately funded projects to meet the needs of the arts community in areas such as disaster preparedness and temporary public art projects that vitalize neighborhoods. The Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, whom we refer to as MOCA, oversees our work through our contract. Additionally, MOCA works to shape policy and practice in our sector to advocate on behalf of the sector for important resources and opportunities, as well as helping advance other city department arts and cultural initiatives. So where does our funding come from? What's the resource? All of this work is made possible through public and private funding. Private funding supports disaster services and special projects, while public funding supports both grant making and civic art investments. Focusing specifically on grant making. So our public funding comes from the City of Houston through the Hotel Occupancy Tax. The tax is a revenue collected when someone books a hotel room. A percentage of that tax is then dedicated to promote arts, culture, and tourism. It is then collected quarterly, and once it's collected for disbursement, it's considered hot revenue. HAA facilitates a competitive grants process through 5 grant categories, all of which are funded through hot revenue. We will review the categories, but first let's talk about how this funding gets allocated and distributed. So hot revenue allocations are determined by our contract with the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs and are split into 3 different groups. Of the funding we receive, 74.5% is delivered in grants to the community, 16.5% is a direct payment to Miller Outdoor Theater, and then 9% is allocated to the Houston Arts Alliance Administration. Of the 74% allocated to grant making, an even distribution of 36% is allocated towards organizations under $10 million and individual artists and creatives. 36% is allocated toward organizations over $10 million, and finally 2.5% is allocated towards Cities Initiative, which is a special grant program that is open to both individuals and organizations. HAA administers 5 grant programs, which you can find on our website. Our guidelines provide prospective applicants with all the information needed to apply for 2022 and 2023 grants from Houston Arts Alliance. Our 5 grant programs are Support for Artists and Creative Individuals and Festivals. That is 1 cycle for the 2023 calendar year, which is open now. Applicants can request up to $15,000 for support for for support for artists and creative individuals, SACI, and up to $10,000 for festivals. We also have our support for organizations, 2023 grant applications currently open. Applicants can apply for up to $125,000 for categories 1 and 2, and up to $1 million for category 3. There's our Let Creativity Happen and Cities Initiative grant programs, which have multiple grant deadlines. There are 4 rounds throughout this year. The first closed on April 29th and the second on June 30th. The third round of applications for those will open on August 2nd, and then the last round will open on October 1st. Applications can request up to $2,500 for Let Creativity Happen, and typical awards for Cities Initiative are between $5,000 to $10,000. Any request exceeding $10,000 requires a preliminary meeting. Individuals can apply to LCH, CI, and SACI, while 501c3 nonprofits can apply to Let Creativity Happen, Cities Initiative, and either festivals or support for organizations. Now, based on community input requesting greater stability as a result of COVID-19, HAA changed the schedule of festivals and support for artists and creative individuals grant programs to ensure grants are awarded based on existing funds, so cash in hand and not projected income. This practice helps guarantee grant amounts with greater certainty. So for instance, for SACI, grantees will receive 80% once they sign their contract and the remaining 20% once their final report is approved. Support for organizations, those grants will continue to be awarded based on projected income. Projected income is subject to change mid-year in amounts, contingent on the economic performance of the Hotel Occupancy Tax. Grants based on projected income have a guaranteed share of HOT, which is estimated at a dollar amount. However, these dollar amounts are not necessarily guaranteed. Support for organization grantees will sign contracts that reflect these facts. Exact amounts for support for organization grantees are subject to economic fluctuations, such as those globally and locally experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as other natural disasters and acts of God. For example, in the 2020 grant year, HOT experienced a 42% reduction from original projected amounts. Actual HOT amounts are unknown to HAA until the funding is deposited by the City of Houston into HAA accounts. HAA distributes these funds to contracted grantees 2 weeks after the city deposits them into our accounts. The first cycle of 2022 SACI and Festival was launched in fall of last year for projects occurring between January to June of this year. The current cycle that we launched March 1st are for projects that will occur from July to December of this year. And then this summer, we've launched 2023 SO, SACI, and Festival cycles. So make sure you follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter to be made aware of any important information and deadlines as we get closer to the close of applications on July 29th, 2022. Finally, SACI, Festival, and SO grant cycles will be for the calendar year of 2023. They are 1-year grant terms. This means that the public presentation, whether virtual or in person, should be conducted within the 12-month term unless staff is notified of any delays in advance and an extension is granted. You should not wait until the last month of your grant to advise staff of any obstacles you are facing. We highly encourage you to meet with us so that we can support you in any possible way. Please, please, please do not hesitate to reach out because we are here to help you. The guidelines provide instructions for all city-funded grant opportunities and has a section dedicated to each grant program. By starting here, you will be able to see which grant program is right for you and what you need to be successful. All applicants are held to the same guidelines, so all applicants are strongly encouraged to read the guidelines in their entirety, which means this document will significantly help you improve your chances. The guidelines are available for viewing and downloading on our website. So let's get into some general eligibility requirements that apply to all applicants. First, we'll start with the eligibility section. So all 5 of these points laid out in our general eligibility requirements are equally important and are reviewed by grant staff to ensure you're eligible and you can move to the panel stage of the process. All applicants must provide official documentation demonstrating a physical address in the City of Houston limits. PO boxes are not accepted, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on that point later. Organizations or its fiscal sponsor must be tax exempt under Internal Revenue Code section 501c3 with its fiscal year ending in 2019 filed with the IRS. An individual applicant must be at least 18 years or older, which will be verified by the applicant's submission of a state issued ID, a passport, or other official documentation. For clarity, as an applicant who's applying as an organization, you do not need to provide proof of age. But for our artists or our applicants who are applying as artists or creatives, let's say the LCH or SACI, they must be at least 18 years of age or older and submit proof of that age. Circling back to the City of Houston requirements. So part of eligibility is that you live or you're headquartered within the City of Houston limits. Within your application, your proof of headquarters or residency is paperwork demonstrating a physical address in the City of Houston limits. A physical address is verified by the grants team through an online website we use. It's a council member mapping tool, which you can also access through the guidelines or by Googling "who is my council member." Again, PO boxes are not accepted and the documentation must have your name present. Acceptable documentation for individuals can include insurance, a state issued ID, a driver's license, or a phone / utility bill, maybe a current lease agreement or an IRS tax filing. This document must be addressed to you as the individual, and if you are applying as a collaboration, one artist must be the applicant and submit materials for that one artist. Acceptable documents for organizations and fiscal sponsors could include mail from a government entity addressed to the organization, a current lease agreement, a bank statement, or insurance. Again, that document must be addressed to the organization. Now let's talk a little bit about fiscal sponsors. So fiscal sponsors must be registered on the grants portal and linked with a project. Here you will find some best practices for fiscal sponsors and some eligibility requirements. These can be found on pages 7 through 8 of the guidelines. Really important thing to note here is that both fiscally sponsored projects and the sponsored party must demonstrate residency within City of Houston limits. Other requirements other requirements include having a conflict of interest policy in place and for the sponsor to maintain sufficient financial resources and the ability to audit its program leaders. To associate your fiscal sponsor with an application, you'll open your application and select the associated contacts in the menu on the left side of the screen. Search for your fiscal sponsor and then choose their role as fiscal sponsor. Now let's get into some necessary parts that make for a successful proposal. First and foremost, we'll talk about the public presentation requirement. This is one of the items required by all of our grantees and applicants. The public presentation must be either an online virtual presentation or an in-person event that follows the current CDC public health guidelines. The event must be open to the public, benefiting or accessible to a City of Houston audience. Public presentations may be ticketed, but they cannot exclude the public or limit who may be a member of the audience. If the event has limited capacity due to COVID restrictions, for instance, everyone must have an equal opportunity or access to attend on a first come, first served basis. The applicant must identify how the public will access the event in their application, so make sure you're able to speak to that in your proposal. Another question we receive a lot is with regard to ticketed events. So yes, events can be ticketed. They just cannot exclude or limit who may be in attendance. And just to give you an idea, grants can help support art exhibitions, film screenings, music, dance, and theater performances, online art projects, literary readings and publications, local arts festivals, and other activities. This isn't an exhaustive list by any means, but it is up to you to make it clear in your application what the project is. Please also be made aware that any applicant whose primary program takes place in K through 12 schools or is geared towards the youth must also have a public-facing event that is open and accessible to the general public of all ages and groups. Lastly, for public art proposals, any proposal that requires city permits or approvals such as publicly installed art, street closures, sound amplification in public space, or murals, the applicant is solely responsible for securing the necessary permits, permissions, insurance, and approvals. To have a complete application, you must also have your work samples so the panels know what you are capable of and if possible, what the event will look like. Work samples are divided into 5 images, audio or video files, and then 5 PDF files. A few other requirements. We do pre-request the W-9 and ACH forms in your applicant profile. That makes it easier for the grants department and finance team to have that information readily available once decisions are approved, so the payment process is seamless. And for fiscally sponsored applicants, all fiscal sponsors must upload a copy of the fiscal sponsorship agreement to the application. Now let's talk about the grants portal, which is where you will apply. So the grants portal is located at haa.smartsimple.com. You will log in or register if you are new to the system. When you are in the grants portal, you'll click organizational profile for organizations, and then you'll upload the required documents and update your profile. You'll scroll down to funding opportunities, click apply now to begin an application. Once your application form is complete and takes into consideration the previously mentioned information, you are ready to submit. Once the application is submitted, HAA staff will review the application's eligibility for application completeness. and for eligibility. From there, it's moved to our curing process. After curing, eligible applications are then forwarded to a peer panel to be scored and ranked. Once we have their recommendations, they are forwarded to the HAA Grants Committee. Then those recommendations are sent to the HAA Board of Directors for approval. Once they are approved at that level, they get forwarded to the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs for final approval by the mayor. All application fields must be complete to be considered for funding. So HAA staff will check and verify that all required documents and application fields are completed. Again, the curing process allows for some items to be fixed within your application, and that's for missing or incorrect documentation. You will be notified via email, and you'll have 3 business days to cure your application through the support desk. For individual artists, that includes blurry or invalid proof of age or outdated proof of residency documentation, and for organizations, that includes outdated proof of headquarters. If the application is not complete in its entirety, it does not get moved on for review. It is considered ineligible. So for eligibility, you'll want to make sure that you have proof of residency and proof of age uploaded, an updated profile, and a valid public presentation. The only objective criteria that HAA staff reviews is for support for artists and creative individuals, support for organizations, and festival grant programs. Specifically, we look for programs variety, payments to artists, and stewardship of public resource. We verify evidence using the budget table in the application, the SMU Data Arts funder reports, and IRS documentation. After HAA confirms eligibility, the peer panel has the largest job in the review process because their scores determine the funding ranks. Their scores are ranked and then combined with the objective measures to determine a score on a 100-point scale. We'll discuss that scale shortly. Panelists include a diversity of skills, self-identities, and experience, which ensures they are able to properly assess merit in each of the applications. We seek to represent the various Houstonians and visitors that our cultural community serves. We seek panelists locally, regionally, nationally, and sometimes globally. We do invite anyone with arts experience to be a panelist. So if you are all interested, the application is available on our website. So after the panel has submitted their recommendation, the HAA Grants Committee reviews their recommendation and then sends their approval to the HAA Board of Directors. And then the HAA Board of Directors would approve. Both groups do not vote on the grantees or the amounts or make any sort of adjustments or changes to the recommendations. They are simply auditing whether or not we followed the process as it's been publicly communicated and shared. Finally, they are sent to MOCA, where the mayor has final approval. The recommendations are not final until we receive that approval from the mayor. Let's shift now and talk specifically about support for organizations. So the support for organizations 2023 term length is 1 year. That grant term starts January 1st, 2023 and ends December 31st, 2023. After the grant term has ended, the grantee has 30 days to complete their final report, which will be due on January 30th, 2024. The Support for Organizations Grant Program accepts 501c3 nonprofit and fiscally sponsored applicants annually to support arts and cultural activities that are open to the public. There are 3 different categories within Support for Organizations Grant Program. All grant amounts listed below are dependent on HOT projections being realized. So requirements specific to categories 1 and 3. So first and foremost, they must be arts or history organizations with an art form, history, or preservation named in the purpose / mission found on page 1 or 2 of their most recently made public 990 form. So we do ask for the 990s to verify those purpose mission statements. Or they must be a museum as defined by the International Council of Museums. For category 1, the organization must be a 501c3. They must have been in existence for at least 1 year with arts named in its mission. Again, that's verified in the applicant's 990. They may apply for up to $125,000 or a maximum of 20% of the organization's operating expenses, excluding the value of in-kind contributions. For category 2, fiscally sponsored or non-art specific 501c3 organizations with art specific programming. Or a 501c3 organization with the arts named in its mission, but has been less than 1 year of operations. Applicants may apply for up to $62,500 or a maximum of 10% of the arts program budget, excluding the value of in-kind contributions. So category 2 is specifically for fiscally sponsored or non-art specific 501c3 organizations or organizations that do have that status, but they've been in operations for less than a year. And then category 3, those are 501c3 organizations in existence for at least 5 years, providing public programs throughout each calendar year and offering free / discounted programs with arts named in its mission. This is verified again by HA staff through the 990. They must have operating expenses over $10 million, less in-kind contributions, and direct financial support from other City of Houston sources. We will verify that through the SMU Data Arts funder reporting, which we'll get to in a second. Applicants may apply up to $1 million or a maximum of 3% of the organization's operating expenses, excluding the value of in-kind contributions. Fiscally sponsored organizations are not eligible in this category. Here we have just an application checklist to make sure that you have all of these requirements completed and uploaded in your application portal. Talking specifically about financial reporting. So the application must meet one of the 3 financial reporting requirements. For organizations and fiscal sponsored programs who have at least 1 year of financial history, you must generate and submit a funder report on the SMU Data Arts funder report website. And the sponsored program must complete a program specific budget within the application. Fiscally sponsored programs with no previous financial history must submit the budget table in the online application, and the fiscal sponsor must submit that SMU Data Arts funder report. And then for first year organizations with no previous financial history or have an IRS tax exemption less than 1 year old, you must submit that budget table in the online application. And you also must submit a funder report from SMU Data Arts. That's even if you have to fill out all zeros, we still need to have that funder report. Support for organizations 1, 2, 3, and festival applicants must complete a cultural data profile for the fiscal year ending in 2021. While only one CDP is required, the platform will share with HAA 3 years of data if that is available. And just to give you a little background, SMU Data Arts uniformly collects data about arts organizations' finances and programs. This uniformity allows for useful data analysis about the field, not only locally, but also nationally. The CDP is their flagship service. It enables organizations to view trends in its history and benchmark against peers through reliable and comprehensive data on arts in Houston. And if you want to learn more, you can sign up for a free live orientation webinar on the SMU Data Arts calendar. We have information on how to generate that funder report on page 15 of the guidelines, but I would also encourage you all, if you are having any issues or have any questions about completing that CDP, you can reach out to HAA staff and we can try to assist, but I would always encourage people to contact or email SMU Data Arts Support Center directly. They are extremely helpful, always happy to help, and they have a keen understanding of their system that is really useful as you are trying to fill out these reports. So we have their information listed here. Please, please, please reach out to them if you have any issues or questions. Here's information on our budget template. So support for organizations, category 2 applicants, applicants with less than 1 year of financial history, and or 501(c)(3) tax exempt, fiscally sponsored applicants, and festival support for artists and creative individuals, cities initiative, Let Creativity Happen applicants. Everybody fills out a budget template, okay? So let's talk about how to use that budget table. You'll use the income and expenses table to report the full cost of your proposed arts and cultural programming. If recommended for funding, the award amounts will follow the guidelines for the specific grant program to which you are applying. In the income section, you'll add all of your funding sources, including the amount you are requesting in the grant application. In row 1, the contributed city of Houston row, you'll list the request under the amount of request column. And then in rows 2 through 9, you will list other funding sources under the other funds column. The columns will automatically calculate the sum, which will appear in the row labeled total. In the expenses section, in that amount of request column, you should only list the expenses that will be covered by the city grant. Be sure to review the what may not be funded section on pages 9 through 10 of the grant guidelines to ensure only eligible expenses are listed under the column. In the other funds column, you should list all other expenses that will be covered by other funding sources. The columns will automatically calculate the sum, which will appear in the row labeled total. In the description column, you can use the description text box in each row to provide additional details about the income or expense line item. Here we have a list of what HAA grants may not support. All of these items are extremely important, but I want to reemphasize to make sure that your event is located within the city of Houston limits and that it is open to the general public. Here, it's important to note that for collaborations, there can only be one application and not multiple applications to support one project. And then here we have specific expenses not permitted. That includes travel outside of the city of Houston, deficits, loans, interest on loans, fines, penalties, and costs of litigation. Training, including but not limited to classes, conferences, or workshops. the purchase of equipment exceeding $250, except rental costs directly affiliated with the funded project, capital expenses, and meals, refreshments, and catering expenses. So no food. All right, let's lay out the review criteria in that 100-point scale that applications are scored on. All of these questions, or all of the questions on the application in the portal, are also available for your reference in the guidelines. So out of that 100-point scale, 45 points are directed towards artistic programming. 30 points are directed towards public benefit, and that breakdown is 15 points for marketing and service, 5 points for program variety, and 10 points for program location. And then 25 points for the stewardship of public resources section. SO category 1 and 2 have a different set of stewardship assessment questions from SO category 3. Stewardship is a subjective assessment. And for an additional breakdown on what makes up each of these sections, please see our guidelines. Here's just a quick timeline to kind of give you a scope of our process. So the grant application opened up July 1st. It will close July 29th at 5 p.m. Central Time sharp. No application materials will be accepted after this date, so or this time. So please, please, please make sure you get in everything you need ahead of that 5 p.m. deadline. Anticipate anything that might pop up. So yeah, the earlier, the sooner, the better. August 1st through August 15th, HAA verifies application eligibility. August 22nd through September 19th, the panelists will review and score applications independently, and then September 12th through 19th, the panelists will convene to review and finalize award recommendations. September 19th through October 13th, the HAA team will put together award recommendations packets and prepare that for subsequent approvals. HAA Grants Committee and Board will review and approve the recommendations October 27th. And then from October 27th to December 1st, the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs will review and approve the award recommendations. And you can expect notifications around awards or about awards between December 14th and December 29th, 2022. What you can expect after acceptance. So once you sign your contract, the grants department sends your first payment to the finance department. Processing of the first payment takes about 2 weeks for your disbursement into your account on file. With your final report, you can submit that at any time over the course of the grant term, but we will need the documentation showing the project has come to an end. And then the final payment will come after approval of the final report. SO will be delivered as 4 separate payments based on projected quarterly hot revenue. Exact grant amounts for SO, actual hot amounts are unknown to HA until the funding is deposited into the accounts. And again, HA distributes those funds to the contracted grantees 2 weeks after the city deposits them into our accounts. The grant term is 1 year from award notification, and then the final report is due 30 days after the end of that grant term. There are 4 major requirements that we have for that final report. The first being work samples, then the financial report where you list expenses that are eligible to be covered under the grant. There's a cultural events calendar posting that is required. And then marketing materials. So you'll need to make sure that you include the City of Houston seal and the credit line to credit the city and funder. You can find information about that at haatx.com/logos. And for more information about our final reporting process, you can visit haatx.com/final reporting. There you can find information regarding what a final report even is, key guidelines in preparing for a final report, and then how to submit that final report. Here is a list of our workshop schedules over the course of July. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you might have, or just to say hello. To request a meeting or ask questions, contact the grants team through the online support desk, or you can call us at 713-527-9330, extension 450. As always, we're here to support you. Thank you all for joining us today. Please reach out if you have any further questions, and we look forward to seeing your applications. Best of luck to you over the course of this process.